Humans live very comfortable lives, mostly in cities. In the comfort of our homes, we feel safe and separate from the perils of nature that our ancestors once faced. But it would seem that part of us still long to recapture some sort of link to nature, and so pastimes such as hunting, hiking, and camping have always been very popular. These activities obviously have their own set of perils, such as dangerous terrain, wild animals, or even getting lost. But experienced outdoorsmen are aware of these dangers and know how to prepare for and avoid them. But what about when it's something else lurking out in the woods? Something terrifying. Something unnatural. Maybe something you did not even know really existed. I present to you 4 true and terrifying camping and in the woods tales. The story I'm going to tell needs a little foundation. I was 15 the year this happened. I'm Native American and I live in northern Nevada in a rural area. So I grew up near animals and the outdoors. I was a Boy Scout, so I knew how to identify most of Nevada and Idaho's wildlife. But this story I'm going to tell just ruined the outdoors for me. Every time I go camping or hunting, I will think of this. And every time I smell garbage or a skunk. When this happened, I was hunting with my brother, my 2 uncles, and my dad. We were going on a 3-night hunting trip. Where we were going had rivers, valleys, canyons, cliffs, and forest. The spot we were camping was on the edge of the woods, in a valley. It was our usual campsite. The valley had a river that cut through it in the middle and ran into a natural lake that held trout, bass, and whitefish. When we had nothing to do, we would spend our free time swimming or fishing. The water was cool and clear and attracted a lot of wildlife. I once watched a mountain lion and her cub drink from the lake. And I had heard all these stories about mountain lion attacks, but they're usually pretty timid and shy. It was the second evening of our trip when we were sitting by the campfire, joking and laughing. Suddenly we were hit in the face with a putrid odor. It smelled like a garbage dump on a warm day that had been sprayed by a skunk. My uncle said, in a very scared and serious tone, "Let's go into the camper." I just did what he said and laid down and went to sleep. It must have been around 1:30 in the morning when I woke up to our trailer rocking back and forth, and to the same odor that we smelled earlier. I was pretty confused about why the trailer was rocking. At first I thought it was a cow that was just pushing its head against the side. Then I thought of the look on my uncle's face and chills ran down my spine. I tried to go back to sleep when I heard footsteps on the roof of the camper. I needed to use the bathroom, so I grabbed my .22 and slowly opened the door and glanced around for a little bit. And I took off for the side of the camper when I stopped and looked at the roof of it. There was this big black figure that was crouched down and staring at me, with glowing red eyes. I was scared to death, so I fired a round into the air to scare it off. It hopped from the position onto the ground and bolted for the tree line. When it got there, it looked back and let out the ugliest, most blood-curdling cry I've ever heard. I hope I never hear that cry again. I still go hunting in those woods, but I've never went and stayed overnight again, or returned to near that spot. I would consider camping my passion. It's the only hobby I have that I take so much interest in and really get excited to do. More specifically, camping alone. Of course, I camp with friends every once in a while, But nothing really matches the experience of camping in the wild alone. Something about sitting by a fire you made yourself until late at night and going to bed with nothing but the sound of the wild to accompany you. Of course, camping alone also means I experience some pretty scary shit. Usually, it's just animals. Howls and cries from the woods that send chills down your spine. Or animals that take an interest in your tent. I've had bears sniff and bat at my tent, which is absolutely terrifying and usually keeps me up the rest of the night. I make sure I don't keep any food in my tent though, so no animals should ever really want to get into it. The scariest thing to encounter out in the wild, however, is another person. You would think that animal and human footsteps sound relatively similar, but they don't. I've only had it happen twice until now. The first time it was just passing footsteps in the grass. They didn't do anything, but it still scared the shit out of me. The second time, someone stopped and waited for a while. They sounded about 20 feet from my tent. I was holding my breath until they just walked off again. However, about 1 month ago, I had my scariest camping experience. It was probably about 2 a.m., and I had been lying in my sleeping bag for about an hour just listening to the sounds of the wild when I heard footsteps approaching. I remember how they sounded as they brushed through the grass. They just kept getting closer and closer, and at this point I was pretty freaked out. It sounded like they were directly approaching my tent, and they were. They stopped right in front of the entrance to my tent, and I was trying my hardest to keep my breathing quiet. I always take a handgun with me when I go camping, just to stay safe from animals. That was the first thought that came to my mind when they stopped in front of my tent, that I needed that gun. As quietly as I could, I reached into my open backpack, feeling around softly through the clothing and such. I finally found the gun and pulled it out carefully. I held it tightly, staring at my tent door. What happened next made me really start to panic. The person outside my tent started to unzip my tent door. It was slow, like they were trying to be quiet. At this point, I was thinking, no more assumptions. You need to make sure you don't get murdered. I flipped the safety off my gun, and the person stopped unzipping the tent door. After that click, I choked out the words, "Who's there? I have a gun." After that, the person ran off faster than I've ever heard anyone run. I couldn't shut my eyes after that. I was shaking. I thought for sure I was either going to be killed or kill someone that night. I still go camping alone, and the scariness is honestly the best part about it. You never know what you're going to encounter. For privacy reasons, I will not use my real name or anyone else involved in the story. This story all started when I was 10. I was camping with 3 of my friends, Dan, Ryan, and Connor. They were all 3 or 4 years older than me, but we did manage our friendship even though the large age gap. We had went up to Tioga County, Pennsylvania to celebrate Dan's birthday. His father, who we will call Frank, drove us up to one of the campsites. We started to set up our tents until we heard rustling in the bushes. They were just a few feet away from our campsite. At first, we just thought it was a coyote or something, but that wasn't the case. Everyone was frozen, trying not to make any noise to startle whatever the hell it was. I decided to grab my rifle, which was a Remington Model 700. My father gave it to me before he was deployed in Iraq. I took about 4 or 5 bullets with me, just in case one bullet wasn't enough. I slowly walked towards the bush with my rifle raised. The bush was now still, and Ryan started to slowly mumble, and he sounded very, very startled. Afterwards, I saw something. It wasn't human. It stood about 7 feet tall, with goat-like legs. I usually watch and still do watch a lot of paranormal videos, and I automatically knew what it could be. The Goat Man. This thing just stood there on top of the hill staring at us. And we all stood there for 5 or 6 minutes not knowing what to do. Nothing much else happened that trip. But fast forward about 4 years, we all went back to the same campsite for Connor. He was going into the army a few days later, and we wanted to have one last camping trip. Everything was alright until about 11:30 at night. I started to hear screams, or at least they sounded like screams. I quickly got up, grabbing my gun, and getting out of the tent. I swear I saw this same thing, just ripping apart a deer. With me having a strong stomach and having done some butchering with my cousin, I was somewhat used to it. I loaded a bullet into the chamber, slamming the bullet upwards and firing at its legs. As I did, it let out a blood-curdling scream. Afterwards, I started to load another bullet, but as I did so, the thing ran off. Dan, Connor, and Ryan were all saying in unison, "What the hell? Why did you do that?" I wasn't surprised that they yelled at me, but after I told them what happened, we all barely slept that night. And at 6 in the morning, we all packed up our things and left without question. If I hadn't have shot it, I have no idea what it would have done to me or to my friends. This happened about 2 years ago. I was 12 at the time. It was just me and my grandpa camping alone in the woods. Once or twice a year, we would go to a camp and stay for about a week. I'm trying to recall this as best as I can remember it. It was our second to last day at camp. I had gone out to collect some water from a well. I was walking back and looked up the hill to see a man standing there. He was far away, and all I could really make out was his shadow. As I looked up at him, he started to move. I was used to seeing people out here, but they were usually hunters, wearing bright orange clothing. But this man was wearing dark clothing. He left my line of sight as I walked away, and when I got back, I asked my grandpa about the man. He said I shouldn't worry, and it was probably just someone hiking through the forest. I saw him one more time later that day. He was down by the creek, just standing there. I just ran back to camp as I was too scared to do anything else. I have insomnia problems, so sometimes it's very hard for me to get to sleep. So later that night, my grandpa was sleeping and I was just sitting on the couch downstairs playing games on my phone. I was facing a window and saw movement in the corner of my eye. But when I looked up, there was nothing there. So I just went back to my phone and went on YouTube. We actually get pretty okay cellular reception down here. As I started watching a gaming channel, I heard a knock on the door to the cabin. It was slow and quiet. I quickly shut off my phone and sat in silence. Then it came again, louder this time. I ran up the stairs as fast as I could to my grandpa's bed. I shook him awake while begging for this to end. I told him as fast as I could what had just happened. He grabbed for his handgun next to the bed and turned on the light. My grandpa wasn't very old and was pretty fast. He told me to just calm down and stay upstairs. He slowly walked down the stairs with a flashlight in his hand. I tiptoed to the top of the stairs and sat down. I heard a gunshot ring out and my grandpa screaming for me to come downstairs and follow him. He grabbed my hand and pulled me outside. He told me to get in the truck as fast as possible and lock the doors. It was pitch black and all I could see was the light from my grandpa's flashlight outside of the car. As my grandpa ran towards the truck, I unlocked the door so he could get in. He started up the truck and we started driving down the path towards the road. The truck stopped for a second and I looked in front of us, and I saw the man limping down the road looking like he was injured, holding a huge hunting knife in his hand. Hey everyone, thanks for watching. I hope you enjoyed this video. Be sure to like, share, comment, and subscribe if you haven't. One thing I've really been wanting to do is make a video of true scary stories from subscribers. So if you have a creepy experience you would like to share and hear read on the channel, be sure to let me know. You can either like my Facebook page or follow me on Twitter and shoot me a message to do it. And you can find those links down in the description. It can be a paranormal story, creature related, a run-in with a creepy person, anything really. Just send those stories in. And I'll be back really soon with another video for everyone. Until then, I'll see you at the witching hour.